Hi, my name is Katie Pierce. I'm from Urban Initiatives at the City of Calgary, and I was the project manager on the 5th Street underpass with a special focus on the project management of the public art. The 5th Street underpass was originally built in the 1970s, and it is a major gateway and key connector for north-south movement between the communities of the Beltline and the downtown. This makes it such an important piece of infrastructure for us to consider in the city in order to aid with mobility and help people when they're getting around Calgary. This underpass includes one of the only cycle tracks that is connecting Calgarians from the downtown to the south side of the city. This underpass is able to accommodate vehicular, pedestrian, and cycle traffic, which is pretty cool that it does all three. Currently, the cycle track averages 1,100 riders each day and as many as 2,500 riders during peak periods. That's very good. And it has more than 6,500 pedestrians that pass under the rail tracks each day. And a lot of these people are commuters between the two communities. With over 3 million commuters using the underpass each year, this street underpass is one of the busiest multimodal corridors in Calgary. So in considering the underpass, it was in alignment with the objectives of the 2017 Center City Plan, one of them being to make Center City a walkable place that is safe, secure, accessible, legible, interesting, and enjoyable for all people. This plan reinforces the need for redevelopment of the CP rail underpasses, and it also includes the 5th Street Southwest underpass as one of the major gateways into the downtown. The overall vision and approach of the underpass was that the underpass itself from the 1970s, as far as infrastructure goes, was still very much working. It is a structurally sound and functionally it works to support the movements of the CP rail above the underpass. So what our goal was with it and the vision for it was more to focus on providing a safe, well-lit underpass to improve the overall user experience and promote an increased cyclist and pedestrian movement. So the resulting vision for the underpass was to make life better every day by transforming an ordinary space into an extraordinary space. So in approaching this underpass, we had the existing infrastructure. We knew what we could work with and what we couldn't work with. We knew our goals, that we were looking to really enhance the pedestrian experience. And so we had to take what was there, what was existing, and we kind of had to grow into it. And part of this process was a little bit of taking stuff away, and then finding what else would work and would fit there. So putting a little bit of stuff back too at the same time, and public art became a major component of us looking to include more things in there to encourage the pedestrian and the cyclist movement. But I'll get into more of that with the site tour. So I'll see you guys on site, I guess.
We are here on the traditional Treaty 7 territory, the ancestral and traditional territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Kaknini, Pikanini, and Siksika, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nations and Stoney Dakota First Nation. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis and Inuit, whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations.
I especially focused on project managing the art fabrication portion of this project, Below, Before, Between by Jill and Holt. And this project the art portion of this project was very interesting. It deals a lot with the geographical, geological history of the area, as well as the site conditions present at this underpass. This underpass was built in the 1970s. Originally, the rail was built in 1885, a CP rail, connecting the country from east to west. During that time, it was a bit of a controversial project, being that a number of treaties needed to be made with the First Nations community, and also the labor was imported from China. So its origins in some ways comes from a little bit of a controversial past, but it was a great accomplishment at the time. And currently, today, it also has started to change, and the way it cuts through the downtown core, it serves as a bit of a barrier between the belt line and the core, making it so the only points of connection between these two communities is through the underpasses themselves. Calgary has 7 underpasses and 1 at Grey Crossing to make these connections. And so these connection points are very important for pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicle traffic to make the connections between the two communities.
And often we don't really think further back than recent history, but on this project, the artwork portion very much acknowledges a further history. A history that goes back to 3 major events that define Calgary's landscape. First, an ocean, which covered the area for 400 million years. Next, a series of freshwater environments like deltas and swamps covered the landscape. And finally, the freezing and thawing of 4 different glaciers occurred. This made our prairie landscape by layers and layers of sedimentary deposits compressed over time, hidden underneath the ground, which we built Calgary upon. And that includes this underpass, and that includes the act of going down and under into the underpass and starting to reveal that idea of the history hidden beneath.
Because we were working with an existing structure, all of the physical structure of the underpass is remaining as is. There really wasn't any space to expand what we have here. All of the retaining walls needed to stay where they were. The bridge structure we weren't able to touch or move or reallocate. This project very much became about looking to figure out how we can gain more space without actually gaining more space. So more space for the pedestrian, more space for the cyclist. And what we ended up doing is we ended up narrowing the roadway in order to provide that additional space. And at the same time, we found additional space for other items such as vegetation and trees in that narrowing. So we were able, in the process, to actually get more into the underpass. The vegetation provided very much was challenging to get into the project because we're working in such a confined space. We needed to ensure that we had enough soil volume for the trees, and we also had to ensure that there was enough light and not too much salt spray. So the positioning of the trees was very carefully charted. There was only very small zones which the trees could be supported and that vegetation could be supported on this site.
Here you can see the trees. This was what it will look like in its final form with the trees included in between the eskers.
Things that will be very apparent with the artwork is that as you go down, you're kind of transitioning through different layers and experience that process of going down into the ground. This underpass space, it's very disconnecting. You don't necessarily experience the downtown core or the belt line when you transition down. So being able to orient yourself in the city as you move into this space becomes more and more difficult. And so having a piece here, a piece of art that's noteworthy and memorable and kind of defines this as its own place will really help people with that connection between one side and the other.
The esker pieces that will be located between the pathway and the roadway system, they kind of act to divide the planting beds from the pathway. They also act as a guardrail in certain places. They're inspired by eskers, which is a natural formation that's caused by rivers and glaciers. When sediment and gravel fall to the bottom, it collects and forms these mounds. So you can see it's perforated to be kind of like water, and the color is like a glacial lake. The light will cast out onto the sidewalk and form patterns for people to walk along beside.
So these are the locations where the eskers will be going, and they form to fit over this whole piece of concrete. So you can see that they'll actually be quite substantial in size, and then they will be like rising and falling just like a natural glacial deposited esker. And so these elements will be part of the landscape, with then planting beds and tree plantings inside of them, acting as a division line between the street and the sidewalk. And as we go further down, the eskers actually there turn into a handrail and guardrail to separate the road from the sidewalk. It's quite interesting because it's very much an integrated art piece, being that it's actually part of the infrastructure. So there would be no way to actually cut the art out of this project, especially in the case of the eskers, being that it's so integrated in the form and the function of the site. These retaining walls will be hung precast concrete panels, which is also a part of the artwork. The precast panels are taken from molds from an Alberta quarry that has the fossilized ripple stone, which is layers of sedimentary rock that has built up, and it's present all over Alberta. And the theory on it is that this is also kind of what's present behind here and present in the Calgary, Alberta landscape. And the top of the panels will have this datum line that runs all the way across over to the bridge structure. And the datum line is to establish that feeling of kind of it being the top plane, the top of the ground surface. So as you move down, you'll be able to feel the walls kind of coming up and growing, and understand that idea that you're moving down into the earth and then coming back out on the other side. Being that this underpass is a major connector between the Beltline and the downtown, we were very concerned about mobility options and being able to move people through from one side to the other. This is actually the only underpass that includes a cycle track. We included here a raised cycle track in both directions, and it's positioned right by where we're going to have the plantings, and then it comes up and overlaps very closely to the sidewalk as well as you move into the underpass. This is really great because it's a very safe connection for cyclists to make through the underpass space, and also safe for pedestrians, being that cyclists aren't on the sidewalk either. And we included as well a piece of urban braille, and this is to assist with caning as visually impaired people walk under the underpass. This can help give them just like a point of reference as they move through the underpass, and help guide them through this space. Safety on this site was very important as we designed the site. Being that you are like moving down and sloping, in the winter time this can get icy or more challenging to navigate. So a handrail will be part of the final complete design that will offer elderly or children, especially in icy conditions, a place to guide them through and aid with their passing underneath the underpass space. We also have provided enhanced lighting in the underpass. Originally, this design was quite dark. It was a dark space to move through. So there's additional lighting in the underpass itself, enhanced street lighting, and then the artwork itself also illuminates to provide an additional layer for safety purposes, to feel like the space is fully illuminated and also an enjoyable space to pass through. So this existing infrastructure can be hard to grow into, being that so much of this needed to remain. This bridge structure itself, built in the 1970s, is still viable. There's no reason to replace it. So we needed to work with what is here. And so a lot of what we built here, I don't know, pre-existing infrastructure can be hard to grow into. Unlike clothing, it's not easy to custom fit. It requires a lot more of working with what you have and working with the opportunities presented. We took a lot of effort here to work in a limited space and figure out what we could do. With the panels and the public art going up, we were working in 1 foot of space here. So in some ways it was a little bit like skinning good bones. All of this is to remain. There was a level of custom fitting, seeing what we could work with, what we could patch together in this underpass space. A lot of limitations and site restrictions and a difficulty to just get everything to fit. Like the trees, only so much soil volume, so we patched in a few here and there where they could fit. With the artwork, we had to squeeze it into the guardrail. A lot of site limitations, but we kind of stitched it all together in a way that made it all work.
Thanks everybody for joining us on our tour of our hand-me-down underpass. This underpass is one of many that we have been handed down, and we get to look forward to continuing to work with them and asking questions about what we can do with what we've been given and what we can chart and accommodate right now, and what we can kind of change or influence for the future. Working in a city in an urban environment is always very complex, and there's so many different factors. A lot of the time you have to work with what you've got, what you've been given, and then you also at the same time have to be thinking about, well, where is this going and what can this become for future generations. So I hope you enjoyed our look at this underpass and a look at the history that the artwork really pulled out through Jill Anholt's work. Such an important part of thinking about our past as we're building our future, and acknowledging basically where Calgary's come from and where it's going. So I hope this tour was informative. I know that you have some good takeaways, and thanks for putting up with all the traffic noise and site construction. It was very noisy on the site. Thanks everyone.